Today I will be ranking every era of Nintendo, aka every console generation that Nintendo has ever gone through. Now, before anyone gets upset by this video, this is not objective whatsoever. These are completely my own feelings and opinions, which means that they are probably wrong and they're gonna make you mad. So just don't get bothered by it. And if you do, then I don't know. Boo-hoo, go cry. And for some ground rules, please note that I will not be factoring in any hardware performance or any gimmicks of the actual consoles themselves. I'm not factoring in that stuff because that stuff is boring. I'm just gonna be talking about the libraries of the consoles themselves because in reality, that's all I really care about when it comes to these consoles. Now with that said, if you like this video, then make sure to leave a like and subscribe with the bell. And now that I'm done harassing you to subscribe, let's begin. Starting off at the bottom of our list, we have the original Game Boy. Now, I want to start off by clarifying that I do not like handheld consoles. I never have, and I never will. I like it when my game is on a monitor. I don't like looking down, it hurts my neck. I want to look at a TV screen. But then you'll say, oh, it's portable. And it's like, okay, that's kind of cool. But I never feel the need to whip out a game and play whenever I leave my house because I'm either trying to socialize or I'm working a job. And in neither scenario do I require a handheld console. I will admit the only time that a handheld was useful for me was when I used the Switch to play Smash Bros with my friends in high school. Because, you know, classwork was boring and you know, you got friends who want to play Smash, so, you know, whip it out. Aside from that, I don't really care about handhelds. And as for the Game Boy, the only games I played for this system are the Pokemon games. I know there are other games that exist too, but none of them are good enough at catching my interest. I just don't care. I only care about Pokemon. And you know what? Add the Game Boy Color to that list, because the only game I played on that console was Pokemon Gold, and that's it. Both of these handhelds were simply a means for me playing Pokemon. And that's all it is to me, so I don't care about the Game Boy or the Game Boy Color. In regards to any other game, I just don't care. Next up, we got the NES. Now, I know I'm about to catch a lot of flack for this one because there are a lot of iconic classics on the NES, such as The Legend of Zelda or Super Mario Bros. But to be honest, both of those games kind of suck. I recognize their influence and how revolutionary they are, but gaming has come a long way since the NES. Games from this era struggled a lot in quite a few areas. Some games just weren't designed well. And if by the off chance there was a game that was designed well, it was hindered by either poor controls or an unbalanced difficulty. I don't like many games from this console. So the only two highlights for me are Earthbound Zero and Super Mario Bros. 3. Especially Mario 3. Let me talk about that for a moment. This game is surprisingly a masterpiece. The fact that this was released on the NES is actually mind-blowing to me. Like, this is a game from the future. The developers must have had a time machine because somehow this is better than 99% of 2D platformers that are released today. No exaggeration, I would die defending Mario 3. I love this game to death. So, you know, the NES has at least one good hard hitter. Man, I feel really bad about this one. We got the Wii U, and I know some people are gonna be upset and claim that the Wii U is an underrated masterpiece that's just misunderstood. However, in terms of its library of games, I don't think it's the strongest. The highlights for this era are Super Mario 3D World and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. And that's about it. Granted, both of those games are amazing, like 10 out of 10 amazing, but that's it. That's all I can say about this era. I've heard that Xenoblade X is really good, but I'm still playing through the games and I just haven't had time to play it yet. But even then, with the Xenoblade X, it still feels like this era is lacking. Even New Super Mario Bros. U was just a boring game. Like, they couldn't even get a good 2D Mario game. I will say that I did enjoy Mario Kart 8 and even Sonic Lost World. I thought those games were pretty cool. But to be honest, I think the biggest issue issue with the Wii U library is the lack of a mainline Zelda game. That's definitely the biggest factor working against it, in my opinion. Zelda and Mario are a big deal. Those are the games that define an era, so when you have either of them missing, the silence is deafening. And sure, you could say that Breath of the Wild did eventually release on the Wii U, but I don't really count that because everyone played it on Switch. That is a Switch era game. And of course, there are remasters of Zelda games, but those are games from different eras. It'd be kind of weird if I included that. Overall, I feel like the Wii U is not the best generation for Nintendo, but it still has some good quality. You gotta understand, the jump of quality from the Wii U to the NES is pretty massive in my opinion. I still really like the Wii U, so don't twist my words. Next, we have the Game Boy Advance. And I gotta say, it's a pretty big jump from the last two Game Boys because it actually has a really good library of games. The highlights for this one are Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, the Gen 1 remakes, although that's a bit of a gray area on if that counts or not, the Sonic Advance games, Metroid Fusion and Metroid Zero Mission, Zelda Minish Cap, and the big one, Mother 3. This makes me hate handhelds even more because you brought all of these good games to a handheld and not to my monitor. Bro, if Metroid Zero Mission released on console, I would be living in the best timeline. This is the first console in the video where I'd say that the library is truly incredible and does not miss. The Game Boy Advance? A lot of good games. The only issue is that some of these games did not age the best in its soundtracks. The Game Boy Advance's sound quality is not that great, and if the game isn't Mother 3, then it might just sound straight up bad. Aside from that, it's a perfectly fine console. Next up, we have the 3DS. Okay, I know I said I dislike handheld consoles, but as a kid, I seriously wanted one of these. I'm a Pokemon kid, and I've always wanted to play a 3D Pokemon game. So when I learned that Pokemon X and Y were 3D, I started going feral. A 3DS was the #1 thing I wanted from then on, and I would not stop harassing my parents for one. Except I didn't get one until Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire because I grew up poor. But the 3DS was a big deal in my life. The highlights are all of the Pokemon games, Mario Kart 7, the Metroid 2 remake, and A Link Between Worlds. Surprisingly, Pokemon carried this library of games. Even though this trilogy had its fair share of issues, it was still a fantastic time to be a Pokemon fan. Also, games like Mario Kart 7 are super underrated and honestly are one of my favorite Mario Kart games. Oh yeah, and Link Between Worlds. Do I need to say more? It's a Zelda game that somehow managed to please everyone in the community. How does that even happen? Gotta love the 3DS. Next, as the final handheld device, we have the DS. And man, the DS had one fantastic lineup of games. Some highlights are the 4 Pokemon games that were released, the Sonic Rush trilogy, a good new Super Mario Bros. Game, Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, and of course, Mario Kart DS. Now, I won't lie, the biggest highlight for me again were the Pokemon games. I have always been a Pokemon fan, and this was the era for Pokemon. You just had bangers back to back. Black and White is like debatably the best generation. Then you had Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and that is like amazing. I love those games. You guys can't even lie. Most DS players are Pokemon fans. Those games are consistently the highest selling. Pokemon is a console seller. Wait, what? It's not? Oh, never mind then. I guess I'm just stupid and I don't remember my childhood correctly. I could have sworn Pokemon was bigger. Like what is this? Mario Kart also beat Pokemon on the 3DS? Like, this can't be true. I must have accidentally crossed into the wrong timeline because Pokemon was the thing. That was like the #1 thing. Either way, my point stands. Pokemon was the game to play back then. Okay, we are entering the top 5 with the Nintendo 64. Now, this generation of games isn't necessarily defined by how large its library is, but how good its library is. Because the Nintendo 64 is the definition of quality over quantity. For the highlights, we have Banjo-Kazooie, Majora's Mask, Ocarina of Time, Paper Mario, and of course, Super Mario 64. I know it seems biased that I ranked this generation higher than other generations that have more games, but that's because I am biased. All 4 of these games are at least a 9 out of 10 in my opinion. These are amazing games. They all hit the mark on what a game should be so perfectly. Ocarina of Time and Mario 64 especially are some of my favorite games of all time. Mario 64 gotta at least be a top 2, like, it's that good. Check out my 64 review. You can find out why I love the game so much. It's a pretty cool video. I'd say that the Nintendo 64 has the highest highs of any console. You have, in my opinion, the best Mario game and debatably the best Zelda game on one library of games. I love all of these games and I wish I could rank it higher, but the generations above this one just has a lot more hard-hitting games. Maybe if Earthbound 3D was ever finished, this could have been higher, but unfortunately they canceled it because, you know, we can't have good things. Next up, we have the Nintendo Gamecube, a console that is seen as a fan favorite nowadays. And fun fact, this is the first Nintendo console that I actually started playing quite consistently. I mean, I did play on the Nintendo 64 when I was little, but I was like too young to even comprehend what was going on. I had nothing going through my brain. I was just a baby child. Anyways, the highlights for the Gamecube are Super Mario Sunshine, Paper Mario Thousand Year Door, Luigi's Mansion, Metroid Prime, Mario Kart Double Dash, Smash Bros. Melee, the Sonic Adventure games, Sonic Riders, Resident Evil 4, and of course, the greatest invention by mankind, Zelda Wind Waker. That was a lot of games. This console had a very strong lineup of games, which makes it even more confusing as to why it wasn't that successful when all of these games are so great. I guess people wanted the more gritty and edgy games from the PlayStation, but you know, that doesn't matter anymore because the GameCube aged very well. The only problem I noticed with this library is that a lot of the games were kind of rushed out. Super Mario Sunshine, I don't even have to say anything about that one. That one's obvious. It's just a very unpolished game. But then you had games like Metroid Prime and Wind Waker, which on the surface are amazing games, but both struggled with making you unnecessarily backtrack nearing the end of the game. Probably to extend playtime artificially, I don't know, but they weren't great features. Then you got Smash Bros. Melee, and I'd say that's the one game that got rushed out and somehow that made it better. Overall though, regardless of the lack of quality control, the GameCube was a great era for Nintendo. Anyways, let's move on to the top 3. Next up, we got the SNES, and believe it or not, I planned on this being the top spot because in my mind, I've always just believed that the SNES had the best library of games. However, upon looking at everything in retrospect, I don't think that's the case anymore. But that shouldn't take away from how legendary the SNES library really is. The highlights for this one are Super Mario World, the Donkey Kong Country games, A Link to the Past, Yoshi's Island, Super Metroid, Chrono Trigger, and Earthbound. And I gotta say, I love Earthbound. I think the best aspect of the SNES is its consistency. There was no games in this era that were not fun. All of these games were great, and it seemed like almost any franchise that was releasing a game from Nintendo was good. Nintendo was on their A game. They really wanted to beat Sega, and they kinda did. I also just hold a lot of sentimental value with these games. The Donkey Kong Country games are some of my favorite games ever, and Earthbound is just an unforgettable experience. And these games also have amazing soundtracks. Earthbound and Donkey Kong, it is perfection. I know some people will be upset about this, but hear me out. The Nintendo Switch is next. I've been seeing this console get a lot of hate, but I feel like it's only because the menus are bland and the eShop runs at 2 frames per second. Because otherwise, the games that have been released on this console have been nothing short of amazing. The highlights are Super Mario Odyssey, Super Mario Wonder, Bowser's Fury, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, Metroid Dread, a Smash game with an insane roster, Pokemon Legends Arceus, Arceus, Xenoblade 2 and 3, Sonic Mania, Sonic Frontiers, Crash Insane Trilogy, Crash 4, and a lot of great indie games. Maybe I'm coping and biased, but the Switch had a great selection of third-party games. I see people complain about how there's not enough third-party on Switch all the time, but I'm like, what are you talking about? Have you not seen any of these indie games that are just practically built for the Switch? Sure, we may not get any Rockstar games or Call of Duty games, but have you played Ori and the Blind Forest on Switch, or Hollow Knight, or Cuphead? Those games are made for the Switch. Like, they were just meant to be there. And I will stand by that. I feel like the third party could be better, but honestly, I kind of like what we got. And with that said, let's move on to the top spot. For the best Nintendo console, we have the Nintendo Wii. Now hear me out, I didn't actually think the Wii was that impactful in the grand scheme of things when making this video. Like, sure, it was a great console, but you know, it ain't got any Super Mario 64, it can't be the best. But now that I think about it, there are a lot of great Nintendo games on the Wii that I play quite frequently. The highlights for the Wii are New Super Mario Bros., Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, Zelda Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword, Donkey Kong Country Returns, and the Mario and Sonic Olympic Games, Kirby's Epic Yarn, Smash Bros. Brawl, Mario Kart Wii, Sonic Colors, and all of the Wii Sports games. This is what I call a stacked library. Like I said in the Wii U section of this video, I think what defines an era of Nintendo is the Mario and Zelda games. Those aren't the only games that matter, but when those games are good, you know it's a great time to be a Nintendo fan. Those are the games that lead every generation. And for the Nintendo Wii, we got 2 mainline Mario games and 2 mainline Zelda games, and you just can't beat that. And all 4 of these games are absolutely amazing. They hit the nail on all of them. I guess you could say Twilight Princess is also a GameCube game, but let's be honest, everyone played the Wii version. This came out during the beginning of the Wii era. You wouldn't call God of War Ragnarok a PS4 era game, right? That's my point, you know, I kinda included in the Wii's library. Overall, the Wii is the GOAT, and all my homies love the Wii. With that said, make sure to give me your rankings down below, and if you like this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe like the Giga Chad you are. I got a Super Mario Sunshine review coming very soon, alongside a secret Zelda video that is gonna be really good. Make sure to ring the bell so you get notified of my future videos. Okay, that's it. I love you guys. I'll see you soon. Peace out.